In this video, we are going to be looking at individual shifts of supply and demand. So basically, let's start off by having four markets in equilibrium. Okay. So we're going to take individual shifts one at a time. We're going to look at what happens to the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity when we increase demand, what happens when we decrease demand, and so on. So to start off with, you don't need to do this after kind of understanding the basics, but to start off with, let's put in all of our little tick marks. And let's say, okay, these markets are in equilibrium. Whatever type of market it is doesn't matter, and whatever the price is doesn't matter. We just want to see, does the price generally increase? Does the price generally decrease? Okay. So let's go with our first shift, and let's start with an increase in demand. Okay, so when the demand increases, the entire curve shifts to the right. What happens to the price and quantity when there's an increase in demand? Well, we'll see that the price goes up and the quantity goes up. So we look at where our original supply curve intersects with our new demand curve. This is a new point of equilibrium right here. We're at a new point of equilibrium, okay? And why does the price go up? What's going on here? Well, let's do this for a second. Let's kind of get these in the background for a second. And let's take one shift and make it very, very large and very, very obvious, okay? So here we have our increase in demand. Now, what would happen if the price were to stay the same? Well, if the price didn't increase when demand increases, we would have the price stay the same down here. So let's follow this line through and say, okay, no increase in price. So now if we were to look at the supply curve, this is still the supply curve, and the demand curve, they are not intersecting at this price. So that means that if we look at what's going on at, let's say this is $3, okay? Before it was $3 and 50 units were bought and sold. Now it's $3. There's an increase in demand. More people want it. Let's say that 60 people want it at this price, but there's still, if we look at where price intersects with supply, there's still only 50 units available. Because this increase in demand has caused these 10 more people to want it, they're willing to pay a little bit more. In order to make sure they are one of the people that get it, maybe now they are willing to pay $3.50, or let's say $4 for this good or service. Okay, so to get rid of that shortage that would occur if the price didn't go up, we see that the equilibrium price actually increases. Okay, so let's get rid of this and go back to our previous graphs. Okay, so when we have an increase in demand, we see that it causes the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity to go up. How do we denote that? Well, we use what's called a solution box, and for the solution box, I will keep them in the red that we used before. So the solution box is, we're going to have a box on all of our graphs that's going to tell us what happens to the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. In this case, we see that the price went up and the quantity went up. So we'll have an increase in P star and an increase in Q star. Okay, and that's how you'll denote your solution box. All right, so now let's look at what's going on when there is an increase in supply. Actually, let's stay with demand first. Let's see what happens when there's a decrease in demand. When we decrease demand, we shift the curve to the left, okay? So notice that we always are switching colors and calling the curve something new. If original demand was demand sub nothing, this has to be demand sub 1, okay? When we decrease demand, we see that this causes the price to fall. This causes the equilibrium price, oops, sorry, I grabbed the wrong one. This causes the equilibrium price to decrease and the equilibrium quantity to decrease. So we'll say this causes in a solution box. This causes the price of the item to fall. It is still in equilibrium, and it causes the quantity bought and sold also to decrease. Okay, now let's move on to the supply curve. Let's say that we are going to start off with an increase in supply. When we start off with an increase in supply, the entire supply curve shifts to the right, and this causes the price to fall and the quantity to increase. There's more available, and it's going to be sold at a lower price. So it's going to cause a reduction in the price and an increase in the quantity. All right, last individual shift. Let's see what happens when there is a decrease in supply. When there's a decrease in supply, the supply curve shifts to the left, causing the equilibrium price to rise and the equilibrium quantity to fall. So for our solution to this last one, we'll say that there is a reduction in, oops, I'm sorry, let's keep them in the same order. There is an increase in the equilibrium price, and there is a reduction in the equilibrium quantity. Okay, so there are all of our 4 individual shifts. We want to make sure that we know these very well because we need to see what happens when there are multiple shifts on one market. Most of the time, we don't see markets that only have one thing impact them. A lot of times we see multiple shifts on one market, but without really understanding these, we can't move forward. So make sure you study these a lot and practice them over and over. Graphing is something that unless you do, it's very difficult to understand. So manipulate the curves, do them with the graphing tool, do them on pen and paper, just graph as much as you can so that you get an idea of how the shifts operate.